Hi, BookTube. I want to talk about this book, Pod by Laline Paul. She wrote The Bees, which I've never read, but I've heard, lots of people love that book. And this is her follow-up book, very much set in the same world of the point of view from members of the animal kingdom. And before I talk specifically about sort of anthropomorphic literature, the reason I was interested in this is because I heard from the bees, and I heard sort of by extension with this, that these offer different models of political organisation. Because obviously with the bees, you talk about a hive, a colony, and the organisation of that, and different bees have different roles. And a pod, a dolphin pod, but also whale pods and other fish that appear in this book. Again, it's sort of about different ways of thinking about organisation to how humans, and let's face it, our political organisation has sort of reached rock bottom, really, even within democracy. So that's my interest. And I will say that in my novel, Three Dreams of the Kia-G, it's something I examine. I don't do it through animals, I do it through cell structure, how it's arranged in the body, in the sense of you have stem cells, which can form into any one of the myriad of different cells that go into form a human body. And how those, I mean, they're not decisions, they're sort of chemical and spatial sort of outcomes, really, in the growth of the embryo. But that sort of, the fact that some cells form like scaffold cells, and then when the cells that actually build the structure of whatever they're doing are in place, then the scaffold cells fall away and die voluntarily. Or automatically, so maybe it's not voluntarily, and just things like that I found very interesting for different models of political organisation. And so I did it through human cells and development. She has chosen to do it through looking at different models of organisation in the animal kingdom. So it's something that is right on message for me, but it leads into a wider discussion of anthropomorphic literature, because I think it's the hardest thing to pull off convincingly, other than maybe having a child narrator in novels. And I've done a consideration of the child narrator in novels, some successes, some failures, and I'll leave a link to that. I'll also leave a link to, I myself have written anthropomorphic flash fiction stories. One of them about a dolphin, more of which later, but I'll also leave the link to my flash fiction story on that. I've never published it in a book. I mean, it's on my blog, and that's the link I'm going to post to. But it's not something because I just think anthropomorphism is really hard to pull off, and this book ultimately crashes and burns because it doesn't do it. Now, it is possible to do well. I think Life of Pi is a wonderful book, but Life of Pi works because although there are anthropomorphic elements of the tiger and stuff, the main point of view is still a human one of the boy in the raft. And also then it does interesting things about the nature of reality and perception, which then turn the concept of the tiger on its head. So it can work, and I would hope that in the 2 or 3 stories that I've written, no more than 1,000 words, so very limited, they work. But over the course of a novel, I really struggled with this. I gave it 2 stars. Okay, so there are lots of characters, and the fish and mammals in this oceanic world refer to themselves as people in their tribes. And there is stuff about political organisation, of hierarchies, of sort of slaves, of gender between male dolphins and female dolphins, and things like that. So it's in the book. The problem is the bits in between, which are the majority of the book, the storytelling. Because it just does not work. I want to give you an example of, by definition, anthropomorphism is putting human perspective through non-human eyes, or giving it to a non-human. So this is quite late on in the book, but it's not a spoiler. The main dolphin pod that we've been following throughout the story, the leader is old and diseased, and he's basically been seen off by his number 2, his lieutenant, in a coup. which I'm sure happens. That's not what I'm querying. It's the human logic that's applied to this that I'm querying. He had checked on his deposed brother and decided to quietly let him die of his wounds. It was unfair to ask any of his new commandants to hasten his end, and as they had recently witnessed a refusal, Split, the name of the dolphin, would not risk a mutiny. So this is a dolphin who is given to think in terms of mutiny, which I don't believe dolphins do think in. I don't deny that there are coups and battles for leading the pod and all that, because that happens in nature throughout. But to then make a sort of a logical human reasoned decision of, okay, I'm not going to ask any of my lieutenants to see off the old leader. I'll just let him die from natural causes. And, because I don't want to risk a mutiny. I don't buy it, I'm afraid. And that is an inevitable part of any anthropomorphizing in a book, that you have to have these very, very human concerns, very, very human concepts, which I don't think have any place in an instinctual animal's, brainwaves. But the reverse of that is equally, the dialogue and the language here when they speak to each other is very simple. The emotional range is very simple because she's trying to distance them from being too human-like, and that's a perfectly legitimate strategy. But it destroys the flow of the book because the characters here, flip on the end of a switch, from happy to sad, from angry to fearful, and it happens so often. So, for example, beatings are given by the strong dolphins to keep the weaker dolphins in line, and there are so many of them in the book to the same characters. You think, well, that dolphin must have some severe wounds that ultimately are going to account for it, and it's going to die. But their powers of recovery are miraculous, and the next day they're sort of up and running. I will say that there were two interesting characters. One was a remora fish, which is like a parasitic fish. It sort of hitches lifts on big fish like sharks or in this case a dolphin, because that's how it is protected. That was a really sort of nasty, malevolent voice, and I really enjoyed that voice. The other interesting one was a military dolphin who was trained by the US Navy to swim out and plant magnetic mines on enemy ships. Now, this is a real thing. This is what my story is about, that I'll put the link to. In my story, I had it that dolphins are so intelligent that the dolphin in question turned around and thought, fuck this for a game of soldiers, I'm off, and basically dereliction of duty or going AWOL or whatever you want to call it. And my story is it's brought up in a court martial. It's in a huge tank in this sort of military court, and having its defence. Here, of course, it's a lot more po-faced and serious. There's no humour in this book, but the other character I did. I'm not going to say enjoy, but was a military dolphin who got injured in the course of its duties, and was basically sort of brought back to base because they cost so much money to train up. But basically was going to be left to die, and escapes, and is a lone dolphin in this. It's like a super dolphin because it's been trained, but I wasn't as amazed by that story as I think other readers would be, because I know about military dolphins because I've read up on it on myself. But the one aspect I did like and I didn't realise was that part of the training and the annealing of the dolphin to carry out its duties is drugs are given to it, and of course out in the wild ocean it's suffering withdrawal symptoms. And I did think that was interesting. So, you've got this odd thing of over-sophisticated animal thinking with crude and infantilizing dialogue and emotional range. And I think you're almost, because literature uses sophisticated word patterns formed into sentences and paragraphs, etc., I think there's very hard to get past that sort of contradiction of the sophisticated sentence structure and vocabulary. Similarly to child narrators, because child narrators do not have a sophisticated, or should not have a sophisticated vocabulary, nor much other than a sort of narrow, crude emotional range, and animals fall into the same thing. So that's why I think ultimately it's doomed. Now, the book has an environmental thrust. Basically, we're through the telling of the tale, we see oil slicks, we see the invasion of plastics, we see shipping that actually kills whales by sort of steaming over them, but also kills them by the noise that's generated that bursts the whale's sonar, and they can no longer communicate, and they wash up on beaches because their navigation's gone haywire. In this case, they just basically can't stand the pain, and a whole load of pilot whales die. What else do we have? Oh yeah, we have a Napoleon wrasse, which is a species of fish, which is changing its sex. Now, normally that can happen when the shoal leader dies, that some of the females turn into males, and the biggest one will become the new shoal leader. But the wrasse here, to which that's happened as a natural process, is now turning back to a female because of the chemical toxicity of the water. So there's lots of sort of environmental stuff, which is good stuff and is current and needs to be written about. But if you do it in an anthropomorphic way, as this book does, the problem is you're perpetuating the issue, which is mankind viewing animals not as others, but with human features, and treating them as you would other humans, rather than the unique circumstances and environments and everything else that animals need. Effectively, you're raising their animal nature to make them like humans, and that's what got us into this environmental mess in the first place, that you take no account of the uniquely different needs of animals. So I think there's a fundamental intellectual weakness of an anthropomorphic book that is looking to tell an environmental tale, as important as an environmental tale is. I'm going to be reading Richard Powell's The Overstory, which to see if he's skillful enough or not to avoid falling into the same trap. But I can't see a way around treating an environmental agenda, if you're going to use anthropomorphic, that there's a fundamental human arrogance and imposing of human perspective, which by nature is what anthropomorphic writing is, that leads to the reason why you need to investigate ecological disaster in the first place. So, this is a disaster of a book. In a way, I think the bees, the political modelling of the bees sounds more interesting than this, but actually I've been put off wanting to read it by the experience of reading this book. So yeah, not great, I'm afraid, but I don't think you can do writing terribly well. My dolphin story is done for laughs. There's a serious point about dolphins being too intelligent to want to go off and fight in wars, especially someone else's war. But it's done for comedy purposes. I have another one which was published in my first collection of flash fiction. The collection was called 52FF, 52 Flash Fiction, because there are 52 stories in it, one a week, which is about a shamanistic ritual, which channels the totemic animal of the shaman, which is the tarantula. But again, it's from a human perspective, albeit a human who travels out through the use of trance and all that into the spiritual world and the animal world. But it's from a human perspective. I've got another one. Maybe I'll publish links to all three of these. I've got another one which is genuinely anthropomorphic, which is a story of vultures. And again, I suppose I am making a point with that, is these two vultures are in a war zone where child soldiers are conscripted into the war. And it's called rich pickings because obviously on a battlefield they've got lots of food, of dead bodies, but particularly in this case there's a dead child. So maybe I fall into the same trap, but the one mitigation I would give is that I'm doing it for 1,000 words, not 60,000 words. I don't think you can sustain it across 60,000 words. You may think I can't sustain it across 1,000 words. I'll publish the link. You don't have to buy the book if you don't want to, but I'll publish the link to the book as well, and see what you think. I think both the Shaman and the Vulture stories are both in the same collection, 52 FF. I'm not sure. I'll put it in the notes. Okay, so there you have it. Thanks very much. Till next time.